Before he became a music star, Trace Atkins earned his living as a roughneck and derrickman, spending 6 grueling years working on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. For tonight's Big 360 interview, I talked to him earlier to share his views on the disaster now unfolding. Trace, you worked on drilling rigs for almost 6 years out in the Gulf. When you first heard about this disaster, what went through your mind?
Well, my first reaction, of course, was just sympathy and empathy for the men that lost their lives and their families. That was one of the first things I learned when I went to work offshore. I worked in the oil field for 10 years. I worked in the Gulf of Mexico for 6 of those years on drilling rigs. And when I went to work for Global Marine Drilling Company, they had just lost a drill ship in the China Sea. And it was just felt throughout the entire company. I mean, I had men on the rig that I worked on who knew men that had died on that drill ship. And anytime that happens, I mean, it is a big family out there.
All the workers I've talked to, whether it was from the Deepwater Horizon or other rigs, say that it's crucial that you be able to stop for safety, that if you feel you're doing something that's dangerous out on the rig, that you have the ability, and on paper that everybody has the ability to stop what you're doing and basically take a time out for safety. Is that something when you were working out there was important, that was emphasized, that safety is a huge issue?
Yeah, safety was always the number one priority for us. We had safety meetings continually. It was just a routine thing. And yes, anybody from a roustabout up to a tool pusher had the responsibility to point out anything that they saw that they thought was unsafe. And that was another thing that I thought about in this disaster. There had to be a company man that was pressuring and forcing somebody, at Transocean to do something that they probably didn't think was safe, and somehow somebody's objections got overridden, and that's unfortunate.
As you know, obviously, a lot of folks here in Louisiana are concerned about President Obama's moratorium on deepwater drilling. Do you support it, or do you think it's a bad idea?
I think it's a terrible idea. That's like kicking a man when he's down. That is the most idiotic, juvenile overreaction. It's an uninformed decision is what it is. It's just ridiculous. Don't get me started on that. I don't know how many tens of thousands of wells have been drilled in the Gulf of Mexico since we've been doing it, but how many times have you heard about this happening? I think that's a pretty good track record. And to punish American companies for something that a British company did, and that's another thing too, this moratorium is not going to stop anybody else. It's not going to stop British companies. It's not going to stop anybody else. It's going to hurt American companies. Those are the ones that are going to be forced to stop working. And when you just stack drilling rigs, it's not just those men that work on those rigs. You're talking about supply companies, service companies, catering companies, all those people that depend on those drilling rigs working in the Gulf of Mexico. And that's another thing. One of the problems here is that we were having to drill a well in over a mile depth. The president earlier this year was looking at lifting some of the, opening some leases on the continental shelf in some shallow water where we know how to do it. It's easy to do. We've been doing it for over 50 years. I don't know how many wells I personally drilled in, 200 feet of water. We know how to do that. The blowout preventers are above the water. We maintain them. We function test them. We know how to service them and make sure they work properly. When your blowout preventer is sitting over a mile deep in the ocean, it's very hard to work on. Yeah, the moratorium on the drilling is that's ridiculous.
Do you worry about Louisiana not being able to bounce back, about way of life here, shrimpers, oystermen, basically a way of life dying?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you feel for that. It's tragic. It's tragic. But also a way of life in Louisiana is oil field, I mean, you can't just, and that's why I say, just shutting down the oil field is like kicking a man when he's down. I mean, you can't do that to the rest of the people in the state.
If you had to, this may be a dumb question, but if there was a song you were going to sing about what's happening down here now, what would you pick?
I recorded a song 3 or 4 albums ago called Missing You, and it was about working on a drilling rig and working in the oil field in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's the song that I would sing. As a matter of fact, that's the song that they played at the memorial service for the men that died on that Transocean rig.
Missing you. Trace Atkins, I appreciate you talking tonight. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.